for those who have joined us for this impromptu stream. And actually, waiting behind the scenes in the green room are Cat and Jethro from Box of Oddities, and we're so glad to have them. And we'll be kind of checking in with them in a little bit. But first, a big thank you to Kevin. Kevin has basically done a super chat for us. So thank you.
Super duper.
So thank you so much, Kevin. That was very unexpected. Thank you so much. So I guess, since we did the last live stream, there has been so much going on. Oh, my goodness. I went on a cruise to the Bermuda Triangle and lived to tell about it. And that was great. That was done by Mike and Wendy over at Holiday Maker Travel. And it was myself, Mike Hanks, Peter Robbins, and Nick Pope, UFO guys. And it was a fascinating time. I got to go, Dar got to go, Cassandra got to go. It was a good time. I got to tell you, though, on the way back, we had some very rough seas. There were people who were, it wasn't playing so well with them. But most of our cruisers were just fine. And, it seemed to go very well. People seemed to enjoy it. I loved it. We got to talk a lot about UFOs and all that good stuff. So very, very excited that went so well. Now I'm going to just do a quick thing here. I just want to take a quick look here and make sure that we're still going live, because we had a little error message come up, and you never know what can happen. And just making sure that we're still out there live to everybody. It looks like, think we are. Yeah. So, pop into the chat there and let me know that you're still hearing me and seeing me, because I've never had this program throw an error, and today is the day that decided to do that. So we went on a cruise. Campfire celebrated its 14th anniversary. 14 years this past Sunday. We started Campfire back in 2009. I thought it would just be a fun little thing, and it's like turned into my career. So thank you so much for that. And it kind of is neat because we had the 14th year of Campfire last Sunday, and then yesterday we posted the 600th episode, which I thought was just awesome. So thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you for all your support. You've kind of made my dream come true of being able to do this full time. Now, a little bit about today's live stream. It's a little bit different. We're not doing the news. We're not doing the Q&A and all the things we usually do. Basically, I was going to talk to you a little bit about all this stuff that's going on. And then we're going to bring in Cat and Jethro and talk about what they do. And I love talking with other content creators, especially great people, personally great people, and great broadcasters and now podcasters. And excited about that, and I think that's going to be fantastic. Now, I got to get this in, though, because this is really important. You see this ticker at the bottom of your page. Get your tickets to Jim's Campfire Live Tour at jimharold.com/tour on sale now. And that is happening. We're going to Pittsburgh. We're going to Philly. We're going to New York, and we're going to Boston. So this is something that, this is a limited geographical area. I know that. I know many of you are outside of that area. But I also know that we have a lot of listeners in the Northeast of the U.S. So it's kind of up to them. The Northeast is going to determine how this plays out. Are we just going to do the 4 dates and call it good and have a great time, which I'm really looking forward to? Or a lot of in the comments have been saying, hey, why don't you come to Florida? Or why don't you come to California? Or why don't you come to the Midwest? And it basically boils down to this. We're not a huge operation, so we're just going to try our best to make these 4 dates work. I think we're going to have a great time. We've got an interactive show planned. I'm very excited about it. I don't want to make it just a podcast recording. I want to make it an interaction where you're telling your stories. I'm telling you some of my favorite stories, maybe sharing some stories you haven't even heard on the campfire, and just have a lot of cool interactivity about it. So I want to make those 4 shows great, and then we'll see where we go from there. If they're a big success and people love them and they do well, then we'll likely be coming to other areas, the West, the Southwest, the Southeast, the Midwest. But we've got to kind of see how this goes first. I mean, it's just, it makes good sense. And those are great towns. And we're very excited about meeting each and every one of you in those towns who decide to come out. And it's a big help if you go to jimharold.com/tour and get those tickets. We would appreciate it very, very much. And love that artwork from Jim Hamilton. Who is also the mind behind Parabox. He does such nice artwork. I am just blown away by it, and I hope you'll get to join us. And I know somebody else who has done some definite tours in their day, and we're so glad to have them. And we're going to see if this works properly, the tech here. We're going to bring them in now and see how we do. Cat and Jethro, hey, there you are. It works.
Oh, hi.
You're live.
It's wonderful to see you, Jim.
Good to see you. You know, it's one of those things that over the years you get like favorite people you really appreciate and you really resonate with. And you guys are in that category for me. I admire what you do. You do it so well. And, I'm looking here. People are excited to see you. There's Sylvia, so excited for Cat and Jethro. Alicia. Well, that's hi, Jim, but here we had another hi, Kat and JG. And Miriam covers everybody. Hey, y'all. So, I mean, most of the people watching this are going to know you guys. But in case they don't, tell us a little bit of your story and how you started with the Box of Oddities and now expanded podcasting.
Well, if they do know about us, it's probably because of you, and you're so sweet, and you have done so much generosity toward us with your podcast and ads, and we've really loved getting to know you, and I have to say you're one of our faves.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. And I mean, you've been doing this for years now. How many years has it been?
It's I think it was 1st of March, we celebrated our 5th anniversary. And again, not to harp on this, but in large part due to you, we were trying to think of a way that we could kind of take control of our lives a little bit because we love to travel. And I was listening to not just Campfire, but Paranormal Podcast and was hooked on it. And then you started talking about how you do it full time, and at that point I had never considered that possibility. So I'm like, well, heck, let's see if we can do that. So you inspired us to do this, Jim, and we're very grateful for you.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I think your background is so interesting because I worked in radio, but I worked behind the scenes. You guys were in the booth. Can you both talk about your radio experience? Because I think that comes through so powerfully when you do the shows, and you guys are so good at it. I mean, it's obvious that you guys are pros. Sometimes with me, I'm not so sure. But with you guys, you're definitely pros. So tell us a little bit about that and what that's been like, bringing your broadcasting experience to bear, and how maybe broadcasting is a little bit the same, but a little bit different than podcasting.
Well, one of us obviously has much more experience than the other. I mean,
as indicated by gray hair.
But we were very lucky to meet while broadcasting, and then eventually do a morning show together on, oddly enough, a country music station, and it was while we were doing that show that we decided that podcasting was something that we wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been in the business for a long time, and I think to put it in perspective, kung fu fighting was a current in heavy rotation. I can't remember his
last name. I can't remember.
Douglas.
Douglas. Yeah. I had the first name, not the last name. Carl Douglas.
You sure did. And my career led me all over the place. I know you were in Cleveland for a while. I was in Pittsburgh, not too far away. But all over the place, and ultimately moved back to my home state of Bangor to start my own radio station, which was exciting, and it just kind of took me to a whole different level of poverty.
But that is neat, the idea as a broadcaster, starting your own radio station. I think we all have kind of that dream if we ever work in radio.
Yeah, it was definitely a dream of mine, and I built it from a construction permit, which means that it was from the ground up, and all we had was the FCC license, and it was a very good learning experience, incredibly stressful, and I decided ownership is not my thing at all, and went back to I sold the radio station and just went back to being an on-air personality, and that's my niche.
But some of his...
Go ahead, Kat.
I was just gonna...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say some of his building the radio station stories are my favorites because it sounds like it was a train wreck.
Oh, it was. It was
These were in
terrible.
the pre-Cat days.
Yeah.
But it sounds just awful.
I had a business partner who was less than reliable, and we ended up putting the transmitter site way out in the middle of the woods, and they hadn't run power to it yet.
Oh, not good.
And so we were operating this 50,000 watt FM radio station on diesel generators.
Oh, my God.
And one of the tanks sprang a leak. And so to keep the radio station on the air, we drove my business partner's old, like a Plymouth Woody station wagon out there. And then we, one of the backup generator was gas. So we put a siphon tube into his gas tank and siphoned gas out of his gas tank into the gasoline backup generator and got the radio station back on the air. And the funny thing was, when he'd gunned the engine, the radio station got louder.
Oh my God. But but you know what? The funny thing is, you are kind of like a radio station owner now, without the tower and without a lot of the headaches.
Well, without the overhead.
Without the overhead. But there are a lot of parallels. When I worked in radio, I'm going to go back to the two-shot, and I have a funny observation about the two-shot before I finish this anecdote. You notice how I look like I got really small? Well, I realized when I last used this two-shot, it was for St. Patrick's Day, and I had a large hat on, a large green hat, so I framed it. So we're going to see, now I feel much better. There we go. But anyway.
That's fine, because I keep moving hours to try to reduce the glare.
Yes.
I'm like, this
way? You're coming in.
This way?
It's amazing. I'm an old guy. It's amazing to me that we can even do this stuff. I know,
it's incredible.
It is crazy. So anyway, I feel much better because I'm like, why am I framed so oddly? I look like Hervé Villachet's down there. The plane, boss, the plane. No, it was because I was half drunk and I had a huge green hat on. So anyway, back to my anecdote. When I worked at a radio station, and probably much to the chagrin of my sales manager, I would always watch how other people did their job. Like, I was interested in how traffic did their job. I was interested in how the business office did their job. I was definitely interested in the announcers and the production people, how they did their job. I just kind of studied it all and probably spent more time in the building than I should have. I should have been out selling more ads. But the thing was, I could never figure out, why do I have such a drive to do this? And now I know why. Because probably, I'm sure like you guys, I do a lot of functions of all of those people, and that's where I learned to do it, was in radio.
Yeah, that's very true. We've been able to apply a lot of the skills that we acquired working in terrestrial radio to what we do in podcasting. And I think not the least of which is the ability to do our own editing and production, and that way we can control exactly how we want the end result to sound, as opposed to, and there's nothing against this, a lot of podcasts do it, farming it out to somebody else to take care of the editing process. But that experience has afforded us an opportunity.
Well, honestly, it's one of those things where I have used outside editors, and I'm currently using some outside editors on some things, but I gotta admit most of the time, even though it's a lot of work, I prefer to do it myself. Because it's like, they do a great job, the company that I've been working with recently, but it's just, I think sometimes I love to have that control and knowing how to do it and do it quickly. I think that is so awesome. And just to know that you're steering your own ship, and if it sinks, it sinks, and if it swims, it swims, but it's all on you. I think that's really great. So I want to talk a little bit about the content, and there's your webpage, theboxofoddities.com, for the Box of Oddities, and you're also, have done some other podcasts. Tell us about the Box of Oddities and really all the podcasts that you're up to these days.
Well, we launched our second podcast last July, I think it was, and it's called The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. My dear friend Lindsay Schnebley, somebody that I've known for decades, and he was in radio and television, but he's now a voiceover artist, and you may have heard him.
Voice.
He's got a wonderful voice, and he's on the most recent Allstate insurance commercial that's running nationwide right now. But he's done stuff for major motion pictures, and so we'd kind of talked about doing something. And one of the things that we always did as friends over the decades was just collect stories of people doing stupid things. And we would always say it's the shallow end of the gene pool,
Right.
And so we decided that's what we were going to do. And so shallow end of the gene pool is just us telling stories about people doing really, really stupid things. And also people writing in and sending us their audio files of experiences that they've had, their personal...
Their shallow end moment.
Yeah, their shallow end moment. And we just cleared about 500,000 downloads. It's, as you know, it's a slog when you're first building a new podcast, but we're encouraged by it so far.
Jan says, loving all your podcasts, can't believe how stupid people are on the shallow end. So you've got some listeners here for sure.
Yeah,
now,
we had one story, Jim, where a woman was, she was in a national park, and she was using one of those vault toilets. They're like outhouses essentially, where just everything goes into a big tank underneath. She was in there with her dog, and she finished her business and stood up and turned around, and she dropped her cell phone into the toilet.
Oh, Lord.
And so it was just out of her reach. She was reaching way in to get it, and she couldn't quite get it. So she took her dog leash and tied it to her belt, and then tied the dog leash to the side
moment.
It's a MacGyver moment. And she leaned way in, and then the leash let go, and she went head first right into the... That's a good example of the types of things that you'll hear on the shallow end.
Oh, man, I could just imagine. And I know how tied I am to my cell phone, but I don't know if I would go quite that far. I don't know if I'd go I try to figure out something else.
That's why we have insurance on our cell phones.
Now, you were talking on the Box of Oddities, just the last episode, I think it was, where dogs' feet smell like Fritos. Why do dogs' feet smell like Fritos? Can you tell us about that? Because I thought that, first of all, I'm like, damn, they're right. And secondly, there's a whole backstory to this. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that one?
No, not at all. That was an episode where we talked about bizarre studies that people got funded. And one of them was to determine why dogs' feet smell like Fritos or popcorn. And why is it that we love it so much as human beings? And the first part of that equation is that it's a combination of bacteria and yeast that gets into between their pads and stuff. And it emits a certain type of bacteria or enzyme that smells like popcorn. And the bacteria, in further research they found, is most commonly found in urine. So, when you're smelling your dog's feet, you're really smelling their their peepaws, as I call them. But the reason we like it so much is because experts on urine-soaked dog feet, say that we like it because it reminds us of comfort food, Fritos or popcorn, and so it has a nostalgic, comforting appeal to us instinctively. And then also, we associate it with our dog, who we love very much. So that combination of emotions and instinctual behavior is what's behind that. It's stuff like that is just, to me, it's really interesting.
If there's one story, and you could have the same story from the Box of Oddities, because, and maybe you said this, maybe I asked this, how long have you been doing the Box of Oddities? Hasn't it been like 4 or 5 years now?
5 years.
5 years. Man, that's amazing.
Well, you've been doing it since...
since 1912.
The Reagan administration.
Yeah, back when podcasts were wood burning, I think was...
Get the crank. But it's not too far. I mean, from the truth, you used to have to, it's people who say, I listened since 2005 is when I started. They literally had to hook these cables up, and, the iPod, podcast had just hit, I think, iTunes maybe a couple months before I started. Yeah. So, I mean, it was this like whole rigmarole. It was like this Rube Goldberg device to download a podcast. So, I mean, really, anybody that says that, I'm like, hats off to you. You're just great, because I really appreciate that. I appreciate all my listeners, but those people that were listening at the very beginning, I'm like, first of all, what's wrong with you? No, I'm just kidding. No, I don't mean that at all. I mean that. Thank you. And just the determination to listen at that time, that was amazing. Yeah. Now, if you had a story that stands out for either one of you, and it could be the same story or it could be a different story in the annals of Box of Oddities, what would it be? Which one?
Just, do you mean a story that stands out and we love the most? Because
be one you love the most, the one you hate the most.
That's like asking which baby you love the most.
I know, it's tough.
That would actually be easier to determine for me.
Right? Yeah, we pick favorites. No shame.
There you go. So what would it be?
Well, I think I've actually used this as an example before. It's the story about the Cheddar Man.
I knew you were going to say that.
That to me was just the most amazing turn of events. An archaeological dig in some caves in Cheddar in England discovered a Neanderthal skeleton, and they were able to sequence his genome, sequence the DNA, the complete DNA. And that was the first time that we'd ever been able to sequence a Neanderthal DNA sequence. So that was a big deal. And so they thought it would be interesting to see if, based on Ancestry.com or any kind of social site where you can get DNA testing done, if there were any living relatives to this skeleton that, they must have died in the cave like 14,000, 15,000 years ago, a long time ago. And so they conducted this experiment around the world, and one positive result came back where one person was connected through mitochondrial DNA all the way back 15,000 years or so to this Neanderthal that died in a cave in Cheddar. And what they found was the person that they matched him to lived within 7 miles of that cave.
Oh my gosh.
What?
What are
His family,
chances?
I guess, didn't get out very much.
No.
They were homebodies or cave bodies.
Exactly. Wow, he should be like honorary mayor or something. My God.
Yeah, you would think, yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's a newcomer to him. It's like, the family's been here 300 years, And that was a weird thing when I went over to England. It was like, there was a door from the year 1000. It was like, You know, something in the States, if it's 100 years old, it's a century home. And over there, like 100 years, it's like it's brand new, you know.
That's nothing.
It's crazy. It's crazy. What about you, Kat? Do you have a story that stands out for you? Good, bad, funny, sad, whatever it might be.
Well, I could pick one of each. But I think one of my favorites that we actually, I just re-listened to, it's just interesting because I don't re-listen to a lot of our episodes, but I happened to re-listen to one about the episode was called The Patron Saint of Pigeon Fires. And it was about a woman who, I believe it was in the 14th century.
Yeah, something like that.
Whose husband had gone off to collect the what was it called? The gifts from the people of the region, which weren't really gifts. You kind of had to give
Taxes,
them money.
yeah.
But they were called tributes. Yes, exactly. And he did not return because a local group of people had found his questions insulting, and so they killed him. And then they decided, because they wanted to take over the area that she was still reigning over, they wanted to send someone to marry her so that they would then take over the entire area. She found that suggestion objectionable. She didn't think it was cool to kill her husband and then ask that she marry one of them. So she said, that sounds great. Why don't you send some more people to my village and we'll talk it over. Slaughter, slaughter, slaughter. And then really into this idea, super, super excited about it. I'm heading your way. And so she and her army went and basically decimated their
Don't mess around with her. Don't mess around with her man.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it was the method.
It was the method. One of the ways that she went about this was before she let them know that she wasn't really into the idea, she collected all of their birds, like their house birds, pigeons, and sparrows, and then tied little packets of fire to them, and then released them to send them back to their homes. So they swooped back, went into the eaves of these homes, and burned the whole place down.
Yeah.
How maniacally ingenious.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't agree with bird injury.
No.
Obviously.
No,
but
it's horrible,
very creative.
Very creative.
Very creative.
And during a time when everybody's roof was thatched,
Yep.
that was a pretty efficient way to decimate a village.
Well, that's the thing. You know, you always hear, people were so much nicer back in the day, so much kinder. But if you go back, some of the stuff that was done to people was just horrible. You know, I was just talking to a couple of archaeology guys about like Stonehenge and all these different things, and he said a lot of times things were built for very utilitarian reasons. Like, for example, these big like stone structures around large areas of land. Sometimes they were walls. They would have a wall and ditch system to stop people from stealing their cattle because it was so common for cattle theft, you know? So, I mean, sometimes I think we don't quite understand what the good old days were really all about.
No.
Yeah, that's
and then
true.
if you did steal their cattle, they might tie each of your limbs to a tree and then just let you, stretch out until you die.
Now, I hate to put you on the spot, but Wally had a question or a comment about the USS Indianapolis story, saying it was a tearjerker, especially when listener mail started coming in about it. Now, I know when I do my show, sometimes people will ask me about a story, and it's like, it's not coming to mind. Do you have a recollection of that story, the USS Indianapolis?
With this one.
Yeah, I do. That was and I'm just going to paint this in broad terms because I can't remember all of the exact specifics, but it was a ship in, I think it was the Indian Ocean, maybe, a U.S. Battleship that was destroyed during World War II, and they sent out a distress signal, but the island that the receiving station was on, they thought it was a hoax. They thought it was that the Japanese were luring them into an ambush, so they didn't do anything. And there were hundreds of these sailors, U.S. sailors, in the water, some of them very few of them were in like life rafts. Most of them were just floating on debris or just swimming for something like 3 days before they were rescued. And the horrific part of it was that while they were out there, one by one, the sharks were picking them off.
Oh, my Lord.
And I just can't imagine. I mean, I have a fear of what's below me in the water to begin with, but if I'm floating out there on a piece of lumber, left over from a ship that I was on, and I'm watching my comrades be pulled down and eaten one by one by sharks, that would be pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we did end up getting mail from people who had relatives.
A great-grandfather
Wow.
was on that ship and survived and told the story. Well, I guess from her perspective, she said he didn't talk about it at all until his later years.
Yeah,
And then
go ahead.
Then he started to share it.
I actually was just thinking about that because I have heard so many times, particularly if you look at people, for example, World War II or Vietnam or things, maybe they did these heroic things or were involved in like these hellacious battles or wherever the case may be, but they wouldn't talk about it. They wanted to just kind of put it in the background and move on. And then come to find out they just had these incredible stories and many times very sad, very tragic, very frightening stories. And they kept them bottled up for 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in this case, the person, the survivor, was at an age where he just wanted to kind of unburden himself.
Sure.
Before he moved on to his great reward, so to speak. And I think that's often a pattern that we do see in situations like that.
Absolutely. I want to take one moment in case we have new people on board just to remind them of some very important information, Cat and Jethro. Then I'm going on tour.
Yay!
It's going to be Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. These are smaller venues, so I recommend you get your tickets quickly. And hopefully this will go extremely well, and we can go to some other cities and do some other things. But we're kind of covering the Northeast there, so there should be something, if you're in the U.S. Northeast, within driving distance, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. And you can get your tickets right now to the Campfire Live Tour at jimharold.com/tour. jimharold.com/tour on sale now. And I know you guys have, we've talked about it a lot. In fact, there was kind of an attempt to do something in Nashville right before COVID, literally days before COVID. And I actually leaned on you guys for your advice on that, and it was set to go pretty well. And then COVID happened. I mean, you guys have gone out on the road in the past, and from what I understand, it's been a fun experience.
It really has, and yes, congratulations on your first tour. We saw, in fact, I was in the other room, and Kat comes running in. Jim Harold's going on tour. We're very excited for you, and it's long overdue. You, I'm sure, will do very, very well. We've had the opportunity to go out and do a few tours. We haven't been on the road for about a year. We took a little bit of time off. We've been fortunate enough to play some really nice venues. We were at probably, I think the coolest one was Cobb's in San Francisco, where Robin Williams had performed, and George Carlin and Richard Pryor. I mean, a legendary
That is awesome.
kind of place. But then on the other end of the spectrum, in Washington, D.C., our dressing room was the furnace room. So we're standing next to all of the ductwork. I got my jacket hanging on a coat hanger on the ductwork, and so it's kind of run the gamut.
But we've had a blast. I don't think there's been a single show that we've done that we didn't just love doing, and we miss it so much, and we are so excited to get back on the road, and so excited for you, because I think you're really going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Well,
It'll
the
be
thing
wonderful.
is I think it's so important to get to meet some of the people who listen to us, because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes, even though you see the numbers and you see people are downloading the shows and you get feedback, and I appreciate all the feedback and all our live viewers here, it's like, is anybody really listening? You know, it really kind of, it kind of resets you and reestablishes you that there are real people on the other end, and you want to do your best for them. And even this cruise that we had recently, there were a number of listeners on there, and it was just like, oh my God, they're real. They're really listening. Well, thank you, Stephanie. Stephanie just bought tickets for the Pittsburgh live show. So excited. Thank you, Stephanie. Be like Stephanie, everybody. Be like Stephanie. One more before we go. Maybe funniest story. Now, this could be either on the Box of Oddities, or it could be on the Shallow End, and I'll just let each of you give me one that you think is one of the funniest stories you've ever run into.
Funniest.
Well, how about I do one from Shallow End and you do one from Box?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. One of my favorites.
Did you hear that broadcast voice, by the way? He turned in the mic and you just heard those dulcet tones.
I live with this. Can you imagine trying to stay focused?
I've got a $1,500 mic here, no lie, and he sounds better in ear pods.
Well, that's a pretty big thing to say, Jim.
Yes. But go ahead.
That's very kind.
Go ahead.
On the Shallow End, I did an episode about an elderly woman. And actually, she was, it may have been Cleveland. Maybe it was Buffalo. Up in that region anyway. She was an elderly woman. She was like in her early 80s, lived by herself, and lived in a high crime neighborhood. And somebody broke into her house. They banged on her door and said that they'd had an accident and wanted to come in and use her phone, and she was suspicious and wouldn't let him in. Mm-hmm. She said, no, I'll call the police for you. And so he just kept getting angrier and angrier, and he busted her door down and came into her house. And it's like, 1 o'clock in the morning or something, and this little elderly woman there by herself, this guy's there to rob her and who knows what else. But what he didn't know was that for about 15 years as a hobby, she took up powerlifting at the Y.
Oh,
and
I'm gonna love this.
She first thing she did was just sock him in the stomach, and he doubled over, and then she gave him a knee in the chin, and as he's lying on the floor, she beat him with her walker.
Oh my God. You know what? I got to tell you this. I wish there were a power lifter, and I don't curse on the shows, but for every one of these bastards that do something like that, I really wish that there were a power lifter on the other end to teach them a lesson by beating them over the head.
Can you imagine the story in the jail cell?
What are you in for?
I got beat up by an octogenarian.
Good for her. God bless her. That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I love that. Wish there were more of that going around.
Yeah, for
sure. Not the robbery part, but the teaching of a lesson. Teaching of a lesson.
Course.
Instant karma.
Yeah, it's gonna get you. Kat, what's one of your funniest stories, you think?
I think, and this was actually one of JG's stories from years ago, but it always stands out in my head. Again, we go back to the days of yore, and this woman named Barbara had been part of this village, had grown up in the village from very meager means, and she just kind of scootled out of town one day. Nobody knew where she went or what had happened to her, but a couple of years later, she returned to town, and she was decked out. Like, she had the dress, her hair was just so. She had jewels and all kinds of goodies, and everyone was like, what is Barbara's story? And no one really knew, but she had this big trunk with her, and this trunk, everyone was very suspicious about what was inside. Is it gold? Are there gems? What's happening? And it really was this whole like rags to riches thing where Barbara was just the talk of the town. So she goes to the local establishment where she can get a drink and stay the night. And she said, listen, I've got some stuff in this trunk, and it's pretty valuable, and I want to make sure that it stays safe while I'm staying the night here. Do you have a safe place where I can keep my things? And the shop owner or whatever was like, absolutely, this is where you can keep your things safe. That's where all of our guests keep their things safe. And she's like, great. And so she sets up her stuff in there. Everyone goes to bed for the night, and the next morning it seems that room has been robbed, and Barbara's stuff is gone, and she's pissed, of course. And so Barbara is like, well, what are you going to do? And what can we do, right? Well, Barbara leaves, and this, oddly, she goes to stay at another place, and it happens again, where she has some things that she has stored in this safe room, and they've disappeared. And it's very upsetting because this trunk that she takes with her contains all of her valuables.
Wow.
But then it comes to light. It is discovered that Barbara, in fact, in her trunk is carrying around a small person, who then, when it is stored in the safe room overnight, busts out of the trunk, puts everyone else's goodies in the trunk, and then takes off with it.
Oh, man.
Barbara's just going down to town with her tiny accomplice, stealing everyone's stuff. And when it was discovered that Barbara had this plan,
she was a con artist.
I was just like, Barbara making bad choices. But again, very creative.
Wow. Well, it reminds me of a saying. There was a great on-air personality in Cleveland who was here for, almost 50 years. You'll know his name, John Lanigan. And he had a saying that 50% of the people get up in the morning trying to figure out how to cheat the other 50% out of whatever they have. And I think that's, I don't know if it's 50%, but there's people who are ingenious in their plots to get ill-begotten gains, let's just say.
Yeah, we just watched the Spanish Prisoner with Steve Martin the other day, and one of his lines is, assume that everyone that you go into business with is trying to screw you.
It's not a horrible assumption. It's not a horrible assumption. You know, it reminded me, you were talking about listening to the shows and not listening to stories, and I just saw an interview with Brian Cox, the great actor who plays Logan Roy on Succession. Do you guys watch that show by any chance? Have you seen it?
Not
I've
yet.
seen a couple of episodes.
It's on our queue.
I'm not going, no spoilers. He's a fascinating actor, fantastic. Plus he does the bum, 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 bum for McDonald's. But anyway, point being, he's tremendous. In my mind, it's the best show on television. And this last week was just a mind-numbing episode, if anybody saw it. But he says, he was being interviewed, I think Kara Swisher was the person interviewing him, and asked him if he watched the show. And he says he doesn't watch the show. So my question to you guys, do you listen to the podcast once it's done? Or do you just say, okay, it's off to the universe, on to the next one?
Well, where we do our own editing, as we discussed, we hear it when we edit, but I don't listen to it.
Yeah. When we go on a long road trip, like when we moved from Maine to Orlando, we looked at that as an opportunity to just kind of randomly punch in to something in the catalog and listen to it. And that was an interesting experience because, you know, we're at about, I think we just this morning recorded our 532nd episode for
awesome.
The box. And
I mean, it's no 600. But.
Well, we've had to do it like 2 a week to even begin to catch up with you. But it's been it was a really interesting experiment because you forget what you talked about.
Yeah.
Did you ever do that, Jim?
Yeah, I was listening to something not too long ago, and I forget why, and I'm like, well, this is actually interesting. I'm shocked. I must have caught a good one. But I mean, not the stories. I mean, I'm thinking more of my interview shows that I do with guests where it's more reliant on, because I feel like those shows, the campfire kind of does itself because people have such great stories. The other interview shows, I think that it's more important what I do because, you know, I bring certain things out. And I was listening to one of those interview shows. I'm like, that one's not half bad. Probably most of them suck, but this one isn't bad. So, so no, it is interesting how you forget. And I know for me, something that happens is somebody will say, well, do you remember when you talked to Mildred in 2004 about that time that she saw the Hat Man materialize every night for a week? And my answer, unfortunately, is like, I'm very sorry, but no, I don't. Because there's just so much, you know? It
So
really
much.
bombards your mind. The other thing I think is interesting, being radio people, you know, when you did radio, it was kind of like out there. It was like live TV back in the day. You did it once and it was gone, which is actually kind of sad in a way. But so to you guys, I would think it's like, oh, well, another one's done and on to the next one. So yeah, it's interesting. Once you're done with it, you're not like listening. I actually, what I do is I have either my kids or I have a virtual assistant that helps me. I have them listen for quality control to make sure there's not a bad edit or something. But far as sitting down and listening to the show after it's done, I don't do it because I was there. You know, I was there.
Yeah, right. I was there when it happened.
Like I said, I did listen to one the other day, and that's because I've been putting together packages for a new kind of project that we're doing. And so I've been, I've had to listen to a few of them, and I'm like, hey, this was fun. I liked this.
Yeah, you forget. Well, before we go, very important, we got to tell people where they can find the Box of Oddities and also the Shallow End. I'm going to bring up the graphic here. That's the wrong graphic. We'll get to that soon enough. The boxofoddities.com. Tell us where people can find the Box of Oddities and the Shallow End, and again, maybe recap what they will expect when they get both of those excellent podcasts.
Sure. Theboxofoddities.com is our website, and you can find us on all major and most minor podcast platforms, wherever fine podcasts are found. And the Shallow End is Shallow End. Is it Shallow End Podcast?
Yeah.
ShallowEndPodcast.com. And again, the show is available on all major platforms. And we appreciate it. We really do. We're so grateful to our listeners, you know. Because
they are great, and there were multiple listeners here pointing out different stories you've had and things. So your fan base follows you. And,
well, thank you so much. And if you haven't listened, the Box of Oddities, you're going to find 2 episodes a week where I bring a story of something weird from the world, and he brings a story from something weird from the world, and that's what we give you. The Shallow End is, as JG said, stupid people doing stupid things, and oftentimes meeting unfortunate ends because of it. But I don't really mind so much.
it's kind of like the old Darwin Awards. If you remember
I was
that.
thinking of that. Yeah. And we had a thing here. I was talking about Lanigan. They did a thing for years. I loved Knuckleheads in the News, and it's somewhat reminiscent of that. I love that kind of stuff. And sometimes you find yourself laughing, and you're like, I shouldn't be laughing, but that's funny.
That's very true.
Well, guys, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. I always appreciate any time I could do something with you guys. And thank you for taking time today. It was kind of thrown together because I still haven't recovered from the cruise in terms of getting caught up on everything. So I threw this together at the last minute. So thanks for, being real pros and be able to hang with me with zero prep. I really appreciate that.
No, thank you. As always, it's a delight to speak with you.
Yeah.
Cat and Jethro, the Box of Oddities, also the Shallow End. Be sure to check it out. Guys, thank you so much for taking time today.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
They are great. They are fantastic, and we appreciate them very, very much. And we appreciate you, and we would appreciate it very much if you get your tickets. There are tickets coming. I was going to try to bring up the graphic again. It's here somewhere, but I'll just show you this. jimharold.com/tour, jimharold.com/tour. There it is. Get your tickets to Jim Harold's Campfire Live Tour at jimharold.com/tour, and those are on sale now for everyone. And I've got a few minutes here for a little Q&A. If anybody has any Q&A, Wally had a question for me. Jim, did you ever interview Bud Hopkins? Unfortunately, I did not. I interviewed Leslie Kane, who worked with Bud Hopkins. I've interviewed Peter Robbins and actually was just on that cruise with him, who worked with Bud Hopkins, but I never got to interview Mr. Hopkins himself. And that was unfortunate, but at least a couple of his proteges I did get to interview, which was kind of cool. On the tour, we're looking at doing a very interactive kind of situation. There's going to be stories that I will tell that are some of my favorite. Some you have never heard before, believe it or not, listening to the campfire. We're going to use an assortment of stories from the audience itself. We're going to have some interactive events. We really want to make it more than just a simple recording of a podcast. We want to make it plus, so to speak. So I hope you'll join me on June 21st. We'll be in Pittsburgh at the City Winery. June 22nd, Philadelphia, City Winery. June 24th, New York, the Big Apple, the city so nice they named it twice. City Winery, and Boston, Massachusetts, City Winery on June 25th. And, it's one of those things where, honestly, I've never been to Boston before. I've been to all those other cities. So very, very interesting. Weekly Creep wanted to know, have a question about what streaming service you use. I know you mentioned it a while ago, but I forgot. Weekly Creep, actually, I think when you say streaming service, you probably mean streaming software. And I use, for this, I've used in the past, I've used StreamYard, which is very good. And I've used this Ecamm Live, which is a little more robust and you can do a lot more things with it. And it's very good as well. So Ecamm Live is what I use. Justin wanted to know, do you have a top scary movie? This is a moving target. I think my all-time favorite was probably The Shining for a long time. And I think, in retrospect, I think Rosemary's Baby, because there's this whole undercurrent of evil through the whole thing. The Omen's very good too. So The Omen, The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, The Shining. So you kind of see where I am in terms of scary movies. Sacred Hag said, and that's what Sacred Hag called themselves, so not me. Boston is wonderful. Yeah, we're very excited about seeing Boston. And it's kind of nice. It's the last day on the tour, so we may have some time to tour around. We'll have to see how our schedules work out. Weekly Creep said, yes, software, apologies, and thanks for answering. No problem. And if anybody else has any other questions, I'm glad to answer them before we wrap them up. We've been going almost an hour now. So we will await a couple more questions and go from there. Sacred Hag said, Rosemary's Baby was so creepy. A couple of words about the tours. Well, we are going to have the base level tickets. We'll give you the full Campfire Live experience for the show itself. We also have some VIP meet and greet tickets that are available. VIP meet and greet. So I hope that you'll be able to take advantage of that if that's something that you would like to do, to get to meet me before the event. And again, that's at jimharold.com/tour, on sale now. I know we had a pre-sale and things for a while, so I'll make this clear. This is for everybody, anybody that wants to buy tickets. It's all theirs. Well, I think that will wrap it up. I thank you so much for joining me for this impromptu session. Cat and Jethro were just fantastic. They just do a great job, and really appreciate them taking time, and appreciate you taking time. I hope to see you on my tour if you're in the Northeast of the U.S., and if you're not, let's hope that the tour is very successful, and I'll be coming to a town near you soon. And appreciate it very much, and we will talk to you. And Jim Harold, and thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great day. Have a safe and happy weekend, and get your tour tickets at jimharold.com/tour. Bye-bye.